In this section, we're going to look at the drives migration functionality that comes with Essentials for Office 365. So the drives migration functionality enables you to migrate from several sources to OneDrive for Business. So the sources we have available to us are Google Drive to OneDrive for Business. We have a file share to OneDrive for Business. So that's normally considered the home drive to OneDrive for Business. My site to OneDrive for Business if you're migrating from SharePoint 2010 on premises. OneDrive to OneDrive if you're consolidating tenants. So if your organization's merged with another organization and you're looking to consolidate into one tenant, you can migrate the content from the OneDrives of one tenant into another. We also have a Box to OneDrives and also Dropbox to OneDrive. So those are the options available to us. So all of these are wizard driven, and I'll talk through a couple of examples here. So let's first start with copying file share to OneDrive, or we could be considered home drive to OneDrive. So I click on this button, it launches the migration wizard. So from here I need to enter the SharePoint admin URL. And click connect. And next I need to map the file system to users. So this is actually easier than it looks. What I need to do is create a CSV file, which is the path of the home drives in column A, and then the user's email in Office 365 in column B. So I've actually got one of those ready. If I click on load, documents, example file share, and down into personal storage, I have the OneDrive data map here. So just for some context, I'll show you that I've got on my local disk home drive folders for 3 users, Adele, Alex, and Alan. And if I just click on Adele, that would be the path I would need to map to Adele. And Adele's email address in my tenant is adelv@mstnd.onmicrosoft.com. So I just open the OneDrive data map here, click open. And just expand this out slightly. You'll see that column A, there's the path to each user's home drive. Now that is on my C drive. That could also point to a file share. And then column B is just that user's email address in the Office 365 tenant. So once you've created that file, you can simply load it in. And you'll see now it's populated this table underneath with those users. So I'll just make this slightly bigger so we can see it more clearly. So there's the list of home drives and the users' email addresses. So the next thing I need to do is check that their OneDrive exists. Now, OneDrive is typically created the first, or provisioned, you could say, the first time it's used. And in order to migrate to it, it needs to be provisioned. So we can use this tool here to check whether their OneDrives exist. If their OneDrives don't exist, we have a checkbox down here to create the OneDrive as part of the migration process. So let's now check for users' personal sites. And that's going to check that these users have OneDrives. Okay, so those 3 users, you see, the OneDrive exists for all of them. So I click next. That's going to bring me up with the advanced option. So here I can choose what is and is not included in the migration from these home drives to OneDrive. So I can choose whether to include subfolders, overwrite if the file exists, or we can do an incremental copy. So incremental copy will copy changes over a period of time. So in this field here, if we select perhaps 2 days, it will copy changes from the source to the target that have happened in the last 2 days. If we put in 0 days, then it does what we call a delta migration. So then it copies all the content from the source that's more current than the target. And clicking on this question mark here gives a written description of what that function does. Okay, so from there, just close that. We can choose whether or not to copy permissions. So this will copy the NTFS folder permissions from the home drives to the OneDrives. So for example, if a user has write permissions in the source, they'll be given contribute permissions in the target. We can remove the folder structure. So this will place all the items in the home drive that are in a folder structure into one single list. So that's useful if you've got many layers deep and you want to flatten that out, because the number of layers is going to make the URL too long. Applying filters enables you to filter out certain types of data based on these criteria. So you can filter out certain file extensions or perhaps documents that haven't been modified since a certain date. Remapping users enables you to map a user from the source to the target. Now, this is useful if you want to preserve things like the created by and modified by fields for the files you're migrating. And also if you wish to copy permissions, you need to remap users. Now, in order to remap users, again, you'll need a CSV, and I'll show you an example of one of those. So I have one on my local disk here. If I go up one level, there it is, the user map. So I'm going to right click on this and click open and show you how that works. So what we need to do is in column A, we need to have a user's aliases on the source. So this is my alias here on my local disk, joburn/jburn. And then in column B, you need to put the user that they're going to map to, prefixed, or the user's email address they're going to map to, prefixed with this piece of text here. Now, there is a way to drill out a list of users from Office 365 using Essentials, which I'll show you once we've done the migration. So once you've created this map mapping your source user to your target user, you save that as a CSV. Now, if I load that into the tool, it says here, one user is mapped. So now everything that's created and modified by me on my disk during this migration will be showing up as created and modified by, let me check, I think it was Alan D. Yes, Alan D. There we go. Okay. So now I've loaded that. The final piece here is Azure Turbo Mode. So Azure Turbo Mode is a method of migrating which pushes data into Azure prior to moving into Office 365. And in some scenarios, particularly when you're migrating large amounts of data, this can speed up the process and alleviate any throttling issues. But in this scenario, I'm not going to use Azure Turbo Mode. So final options here, we can generate a script for the job and run it from a command line prompt, or schedule it to run at a later point in time, or simply click finish and that will kick off that migration now. If I click on details, I can see the details as each item is migrated. So this will take about 45 seconds to carry out this particular migration, and then we can observe the outcome in the migration log. Okay, so that's showing 10 items processed successfully. And if I click now view log, we can see the log for the job and look at individual line items for each item that was migrated. So from here, I can also click select all and save as a CSV if I wanted to do some post-migration analysis. So now that the data is migrated, if I expand out on the left here, the tenant that I've loaded, and load one of the OneDrives. So I'm going to just show this in the browser. Right click and choose a view in the browser. So that will migrate me to Adele's OneDrive. And now if I sort under modified, you'll see that there are 3 documents here which have distinctly different modified dates to the others. These 3, the Word, Excel, and PowerPoint presentation. So they're showing modified 10th of June 2015, whereas all the other documents in the OneDrive are showing March 17th of the current year. So these are the ones which were migrated, and you can see they've all shown up as modified by Alan Dion, which was the user I mapped to, or mapped myself to, when I carried out the migration. So successful migration from home drive to OneDrive, preserving the created and modified dates, and also the created and modified by. So the other functions you can do within this wizard are things like, as I say, copy Google Drive to OneDrive. So you see we have 2 options on the drop down there: copy Google Drives to OneDrives, or copy Google Drives to Office 365 groups, which is a new function. So let's look at copy Google Drives to OneDrives. So this prompts you for some credentials from Google. So if you're using Google Drive for Business, you'll be able to get these credentials from your Google Drives, enter them in here, and then enter in the admin URL for your Office 365 tenant, and then map the Google Drives to your OneDrives and migrate the data from them. During this process as well, the software also has the capability to convert the documents from the Google Office format to the Microsoft Office format. If you need any assistance with these wizards and getting connected and so on, each one has a section in the user manual So I just navigate to that. It's manual.metalogics.com. And I drop down here to drives and go to common functions, and let's go copying Google Drive to OneDrive for Business. There's a description here as to how to make the connection and go through that process. So for each one, it's slightly different. Here's another example of a file share or home drive to OneDrive, which is the one we walked through already, and box to OneDrive. So each connection process is slightly different, but there's descriptions on how to do them all in the user manual. And that is how to migrate from various sources to OneDrive for Business using the drives functionality in Metalogics Essentials for Office 365.